34 years ago, the people of Azeroth were returning to their normal lives after the end of the Second War. The Horde had been pushed back through the Dark Portal, and peace was spreading across the land. But simply watching those green beasts disappear into the unknown wasn't enough. The leaders of Azeroth knew that their world was still not safe, and something had to be done. So the Alliance formed a new expedition, and it was no ordinary force. It was a group of individuals so battle-hardened and ferocious that they were willing to go above and beyond in the line of duty, beyond the world they knew, and travel through the very fabric of the universe into the unknown. This is the story of the Sons of Lothar, the Alliance champions who stepped through the Dark Portal and vanished from the face of Azeroth. Imagine this: you're a young knight patrolling the peaceful roads of the Elwyn Forest. Life has been pretty quiet for you, your sword mostly drawn for wild beasts or the occasional bandit. You've heard the stories of your ancestors fighting 7-foot trolls with green skin at the city walls, and tales of soldiers going toe-to-toe with hyenas that can stand on 2 feet. But the only war you know is between the egos of drunken soldiers in the Lion's Pride Inn. But one day, everything changed. On a distant world, out in the great dark beyond, a race of orcs were struggling to survive on their dying planet. The elemental spirits that they called upon for guidance had abandoned them. They were all pretty desperate, but one orc was more desperate than the rest. An outcast named Gul'dan craved that power more than anyone else. Kil'jaeden, a demon lord from the Burning Legion, the vast and relentless army of demons devoted to destroying all life in the universe, of course created by the Dark Titan Sargeras, saw potential in Gul'dan. Kil'jaeden offered Gul'dan power in exchange for loyalty and a war against the Draenor, the alien race that had crashed onto Draenor. Gul'dan, desperate for power, agreed, forming the Shadow Council and teaching dark magics to orcish shamans to ready themselves. To cement the Legion's hold over Draenor, Gul'dan offered the clan chieftains demon blood, the blood of the pit lord Manaroth. Those who consumed it were turned into savage, corrupted orcs, and together they united as the Horde. Soon after, Gul'dan would make another partnership. This one, though, involved our home planet. On Azeroth, a human mage named Medivh, who had previously been possessed by the Dark Titan Sargeras, contacted Gul'dan. Medivh sought to use the Orcish Horde as a weapon against his own world, offering Gul'dan the location of the Tomb of Sargeras in return for invasion. The Tomb of Sargeras was said to hold unimaginable power. Together, Medivh and Gul'dan opened the Dark Portal, a grand portal that bridged the worlds of Azeroth and Draenor together. Soon after, the Horde, with their bloodthirst ignited, surged through the portal and struck at the first people they could find, the people of the Kingdom of Stormwind. And so, the First War on Azeroth begins, a brutal and bloody conflict that would change the fate of the planet forever. King Lane of Stormwind dispatched his champion, Sir Anduin Lothar, to uncover how big this threat really was. For the next 3 grueling years, the two sides clashed in a relentless struggle, each battle fought over mere inches of ground. Despite fierce defense by the humans, the Horde would reach the gates of Stormwind. Under the command of War Chief Orgrim Doomhammer, the final assault on the Stormwind city would begin. As fire and chaos gripped the city, Stormwind fell, and the First War ended in ruin, blood, and tragedy. Sir Anduin Lothar, with no other options, led the survivors of Stormwind across the Great Sea to seek aid from the Kingdom of Lordaeron in the north. There, he warned King Terenas Menethil II of Lordaeron of the Horde's coming storm, and in response the king summoned the other human kingdoms for an emergency council of war. While the Alliance debated strategy in the north, the Horde was growing in the south, setting its sights on the resource-rich lands of Khaz Modan. And after 6 years since they arrived on Azeroth, they had breached into the mountains. In Lordaeron's capital, the human kingdoms, the Council of 7 Nations, argued bitterly over how to respond to the Horde threat. King Genn Greymane opposed unity out of pride, Perinold out of fear. But everything changed when Turalyon, a humble priest, delivered a stirring speech that inspired unity, and the result, the Alliance of Lordaeron, was born. Sir Anduin Lothar, seen as a noble and neutral figure, was named Supreme Commander of the Alliance armies. Though he was reluctant at first, he accepted, knowing the full strength of humanity now stood behind him. The Horde would storm through the wetlands, clashing with Alliance forces in the Hillspread foothills, but then came the betrayal. King Perinold of Alterac allowed the Horde safe passage through the mountains, in return for his safety. The treachery marked a turning point in the war. As the Horde pressed deeper into Alliance territory, Doomhammer called back 3 Orc clans that had been sent to attack the elven city of Silvermoon. But only one clan heard his call and returned. The other 2 clans had vanished to pursue their own ambitions with Gul'dan. This betrayal absolutely destroyed the hopes of Doomhammer's campaign in the north. Soon after, the Alliance uncovered Perinold's treason. Troops from Stromgarde, led by King Trollbane, seized the Alterac Mountains, cutting off the Horde's supply lines from the south. Now trapped in Tirisfal, the Horde was isolated. He ordered a retreat to Khazmodan, hoping to regroup. Gul'dan himself and his followers eventually discovered the Tomb of Sargeras, but upon entering, he was swiftly killed by the very demons within. Deluded by his thirst for power, he reached his prize, only to perish before he could claim it. By now, the Horde was in full retreat. Their final stand would be at the Blackrock Spire. In the heart of the chaos, Lothar confronted Doomhammer himself. The 2 commanders clashed in brutal single combat. Doomhammer's sheer strength and size would overwhelm Lothar. With a crushing blow, he shattered Lothar's sword and struck him down, killing the Alliance leader. Turalyon, one of Lothar's closest lieutenants, was overcome with righteous fury. Calling upon the light, he halted the battle in a blaze of divine power. Without hesitation, he took command and led a renewed assault. The Horde, shaken and disorganized, collapsed under the onslaught, and the survivors fled toward the Dark Portal. There, the remaining Orcs fought with desperate fury. The fighting bought just enough time for many of the Orcs to flee back through the Dark Portal to Draenor. But Turalyon refused to follow them. Fearing that it was a trap and knowing the risk of chasing the Horde into another alien world, he instead made a critical decision. Seal the portal for good. He called upon Khadgar and the mages of the Kirin Tor, and forming a ritual circle, they channeled powerful magic to collapse the rift. With a thunderous blast of arcane energy, the dark portal was shattered, sealing the passage between the worlds. Or at least, that's what we thought. For the Orcs that were left behind on Azeroth after the Dark Portal's destruction, only 3 futures remained: death, captivity, or a life in hiding. Alliance patrols scoured the land, hunting down any Orc survivors. Many were captured and sent to the internment camps, joining hundreds of already imprisoned Orcs that were sent there during the war. Peace on Azeroth was slowly returning, but not without friction. Tensions flared between the Alliance kingdoms over who would bear the cost of rebuilding, but on 2 issues, they all agreed. The Orcs must remain imprisoned, and the Dark Portal site must be guarded. Archmage Khadgar took on that duty. From the ruins of the portal in the far south, he studied the lingering fell corruption that still poisoned the land where the Dark Portal was located. Though the gateway was gone, he discovered that there was a residual rift that still connected Azeroth to Draenor. He urged the Alliance to construct a permanent fortress to monitor the rift. After some debate, they eventually agreed, and so the Netherguard Keep was built on the edge of the Black Morass, standing sentinel over what would become known as the Blasted Lands. But back on Draenor, the Horde was not finished. 2 years later, on their war-torn world, Teron Gorefiend, the first of the Orcish Death Knights and a disciple of Gul'dan, approached the aged Orc shaman Ner'zhul, urging him to unite the scattered Orc clans and restore the Dark Portal. With the Shadowmoon clan's backing, Ner'zhul took command. His vision, though, went beyond Azeroth. He planned to open multiple portals, each leading to new worlds ready to be conquered by the Orcs. But he couldn't do this himself. He needed a particular set of artifacts to carry out this task. Using the Skull of Gul'dan, Ner'zhul reopened the Dark Portal. He then dispatched his forces to retrieve the powerful artifacts from Azeroth to fuel his plan. Teron Gorefiend led the mission, securing 3 legendary relics from Azeroth: the Book of Medivh, the Jeweled Scepter of Sargeras, and the Eye of Dalaran. The Orcs struck swiftly, vanishing back through the portal to Draenor before the Alliance could respond. With the powerful artifacts in hand, Ner'zhul was on the brink of unleashing a cataclysm, one that would tear open reality itself and forever change the fate of the Horde. After these perfectly executed raids by the Orcish Death Knights, King Terenas of Lordaeron was convinced that the Orcs were planning another invasion. In a decision that would shape the fate of the 2 worlds, King Terenas entrusted General Turalyon and Archmage Khadgar with an unthinkable task: to lead a final, daring expedition through the Dark Portal itself, to confront the Horde on their home soil and to end the threat at its very source. It was a mission from which many would never return. Their objective was to recover the powerful magical artifacts stolen by Ner'zhul and stop him before he could carry out whatever plan he was putting together. And so together they formed a new force called the Alliance Expedition. It was an elite fighting force of battle-hardened warriors, mages and veterans of the Second War. But crossing into a dying alien world with no promise of return was more than a mission. It was a sacrifice. And that's why those who joined decided to give themselves a name worthy of the mission. They became known amongst themselves as the Sons of Lothar, named in the honour of the slain champion of the Alliance. To them, he wasn't just a hero of the war, he was the ideal warrior they all aspired to be. Before long, seasoned veterans of the Second War rallied to the cause, but among them were a few names that stood out. They couldn't have known it at the time, but some of these individuals would go on to shape the very future of Azeroth. And if you're up to date with the War Within lore, you'll know some of these characters have taken centre stage. So, let's take a moment to look at the legendary roster chosen to lead the Sons of Lothar. First on this list, of course, is Khadgar, former apprentice of the Guardian Medivh and already a mage of remarkable talent. At this point in time, he still carried the weight of his past and had much to prove, but in the years to come, Khadgar would rise far beyond expectations, ultimately becoming one of the greatest mages Azeroth has ever known. Next up is Turalyon, one of the first 5 paladins of the newly formed Knights of the Silver Hand and the now acting supreme commander of the Alliance of Lordaeron. During the Second War, he stood as one of the Alliance's most critical leaders, and arguably its most influential figure on the battlefield and beyond. Then there's Danath Trollbane, a proud member of the Royal House of Trollbane, the ruling human family of the Kingdom of Stromgarde. A seasoned mercenary captain and veteran of the Stromgarde militia, Danath entered the Second War with sharp tactical instincts and a reputation for battlefield leadership that few could match. On the shorter side, we have Kurdran Wildhammer, a legendary griffin rider and chief thane of the Wildhammer clan. Kurdran was renowned for his unmatched skill in aerial combat and dragon slaying. It's said he brought down 9 dragons during the Second War alone, a feat that turned him into a living legend among his people. And then finally, Alleria Windrunner, the ranger captain of Silvermoon. Fueled by grief and a burning desire for vengeance, Alleria and her rangers had become a relentless orc-slaying force, and their hunt wouldn't end on Azeroth. Alleria was prepared to follow the Horde beyond her world to ensure that justice was done. With their forces assembled, arrows stocked, blades sharpened, and packs secured, the Sons of Lothar stepped through the reopened dark portal into the unknown and beyond. Quick note here, there are some inconsistencies around what Hellfire Peninsula looked like at this point in time. Warcraft 2 shows it more like the Tanaan jungle, which makes more sense canon-wise, but Warcraft 3 shows it already barren like in the Burning Crusade. For simplicity, we'll stick to the in-game version of whatever zone we're talking about. So some scenes will be in Draenor, others in Outland. Since the Warlords of Draenor map is an alternate timeline, not all original locations exist there. So I've got to work with what's available. Leaving their homeworld of Azeroth behind, they stepped through and set foot onto Draenor, arriving in the scorched, war-ravaged region known as Hellfire Peninsula. They were met almost immediately by Ner'zhul's orc forces, sparking a series of brutal clashes that would rage for the next few months. As the Alliance began to push the Horde back from the Dark Portal, they secured and fortified a nearby position. the Expedition Armory. Though small, this base became a vital foothold. With their initial base secured, the Sons of Lothar quickly moved to strike. Their first major offensive was the destruction of the Orcish shipyards at Zeth-Kur, a port town located in the southeastern reaches of the Hellfire Peninsula, just south of the Dark Portal. Taking out this position meant dismantling a key supply point and eliminating several Horde warships stationed there. Following a successful campaign, the Sons then began construction on a permanent stronghold, on a hold. Two major challenges slowed their efforts down. First, supply shipments and reinforcements from Azeroth were unreliable. After all, they were cut off on an entirely different world. And second, the Horde were unrelenting in their attempts to halt the fort's construction, launching wave after wave of attacks. But as they had done many times before, the humans endured. Despite limited resources and constant pressure, they built the stronghold, brick by brick. What began as a simple outpost evolved into something far more significant. On a Hold became a vital strategic base, one that would later play a critical role in the assault on the Hellfire Citadel. Hellfire Citadel was originally built to serve as the fortress of Warchief Blackhand. It was intended to be the central seat of power for the Orcish war machine during its rise across Draenor. After the Orcs were abandoned by the elemental spirits, the land surrounding the citadel became scorched and lifeless. What was once fertile ground was transformed into the harsh, desolate wasteland now known as the Hellfire Peninsula, and the citadel took on the name it bears today. The fortress quickly became the beating heart of the Horde's military campaigns. Following the creation of the Dark Portal, it served as the launching point for the Horde, marching along the path of glory, leading to the gateway they named the Stair of Destiny. By the time the Sons of Lothar arrived, Hellfire Citadel stood as a centerpiece of Orcish power. If they could succeed in capturing it, control over the entire peninsula would fall into Alliance hands. The Sons of Lothar launched a full-scale assault on the Citadel, determined to find Ner'zhul and bring an end to the Horde's dark campaign once and for all. As they pressed deeper, they came face to face with the ruthless Shattered Hand clan, led by their savage chieftain, Kargath Bladefist. Kargath had earned his name in blood, severing his own hand to escape ogre captivity and replacing it with a deadly curved blade known as the Bladefist. But as the battle went on, it became clear to the Alliance commanders that something was wrong. This wasn't the final stand they had expected. This was a diversion. Ner'zhul wasn't in the Hellfire Citadel. The Horde's leadership had already moved on, and every moment spent inside the fortress was a moment lost. Though Kargath managed to escape, the Alliance emerged with a hard-earned victory. The Citadel, the Horde's command center, was captured, and much of its remaining military force was then crushed. But the true breakthrough came from Khadgar. While examining the fallen fortress, Khadgar uncovered vital information. He learned that Ner'zhul planned to use the stolen artifacts to open new portals, new gateways to other worlds. Khadgar discovered not only the location of the Book of Medivh, but also the presence of the second, equally powerful artifact, the Skull of Gul'dan. Khadgar believed that if they could recover both relics, it might be possible to destroy the Dark Portal once and for all, and finally seal the rift that Medivh had torn open. Faced with urgency, the Sons of Lothar made a bold decision. On this alien world, they would split their forces. Danath Trollbane and Kurdran Wildhammer would lead the hunt for Ner'zhul. Meanwhile, Khadgar, Turalyon and Alleria Windrunner would track down the Skull of Gul'dan, believed to be in the hands of the one called the Aspect of Death. The race to stop Ner'zhul and save the worlds had begun. Let's turn back the clock here. When the Horde reopened the Dark Portal to steal the powerful artifacts for Ner'zhul, they drew the attention of a far older threat, Deathwing, the corrupted Black Dragon aspect. In exchange for safe passage to Draenor, he offered Black Dragon offspring to aid the Horde. With their new draconic allies, the Orcs launched the raids back into Azeroth and stole the key artifacts from the Alliance. Afterward, the Horde and their dragon allies retreated back to Draenor. For Deathwing, Draenor was a perfect hiding place, untamed, remote, hidden away from Azeroth. He smuggled in black dragon eggs hoping to raise his brood in secret, but he misjudged the land's native species, the Gron, massive stone-skinned giants fiercely protective of their domain. Gruul, the Gron's mighty leader, eventually encountered Khadgar, Turalyon and Alleria, who were pursuing the Skull of Gul'dan, now said to be in Deathwing's possession. Seeing a common enemy, they forged an uneasy alliance. Together, and with ogre allies, Gruul led an assault on Deathwing's lair in Gorgrond. The black dragon eggs were destroyed, and lesser drakes impaled on the jagged peaks. Furious, Deathwing descended upon them, but Gruul held him off long enough for Khadgar to strike, casting a powerful spell that shattered some of the plates holding Deathwing's unstable body together. Screaming in pain, Deathwing fled Draenor and returned back to Azeroth. With the battle won, Khadgar reclaimed the Skull of Gul'dan and continued his mission, heading to rejoin the rest of the Sons of Lothar. Meanwhile, Danath Trollbane and Kurdran Wildhammer pursued Ner'zhul across southern Draenor. During a clash, Kurdran was captured, and Ner'zhul fled to Auchindoun, the ruined and sacred Draenei mausoleum. Once a holy city of the dead, Auchindoun had now become a fortress for the Horde's final stand. Soon, Alliance scouts captured Grizzek, an Arakoa who offered vital intelligence, a secret path into Auchindoun. With his help, the Alliance infiltrated the stronghold, rescuing Kurdran and overwhelming Ner'zhul's forces. But it was too late. Ner'zhul had escaped again. With Taron Gorefiend, he teleported to the Black Temple to begin the final phase of his plan, the spell of conjuration, the ritual to open portals to new worlds. The endgame on Draenor had begun. The Alliance expedition launched its final assault on the Black Temple, determined to stop Ner'zhul before his dark ritual could be completed. Khadgar's party fought valiantly, but they were unable to prevent Ner'zhul from beginning the spell of conjuration. Unknown to the rest of the Horde, the Skull of Gul'dan had slowly corrupted Ner'zhul, warping his mind and stripping away what remained of his honour. No longer driven by duty to the Horde, the once revered shaman was now consumed by greed and the thirst for power. As the ritual began, Ner'zhul opened the first of his new portals, gateways to other worlds. He and his closest followers stepped through the largest, abandoning the Horde and the world they had ravaged. In one final act of defiance, a mortally wounded follower named Oberys, injured for daring to speak against Ner'zhul's betrayal, used his dying breath to hand over the Book of Medivh to Khadgar, rejecting the mad shaman he had once followed. But Ner'zhul's triumph came at a terrible price. The raw, uncontrolled energy of the portals tore through the very fabric of Draenor. The mountains cracked, the skies split, and the land buckled under the strain. As Ner'zhul and his followers entered through the portals, they found themselves in the twisting nether, and they were swiftly captured by Kil'jaeden, the demon lord who had once empowered them. Furious at Ner'zhul's arrogance and failure, Kil'jaeden had him tortured by his most feared dreadlords, in punishment for his betrayal and reckless ambition. Back on Draenor, the world was unraveling. Turalyon, Khadgar, and the remaining members of the Alliance expedition fought desperately to return back to the Dark Portal to try and make it home. But realizing the full scale of the destruction, they made a harrowing choice. If they were to save Azeroth, the portal had to be destroyed, and this time from the Draenor side. Rallying their forces one last time, they made the ultimate sacrifice. The Sons of Lothar destroyed the Dark Portal. In that final moment, Draenor died, consumed by a cataclysmic explosion, reduced to a shattered remnant of what once was. But through their sacrifice, Azeroth was spared. Azeroth had lost its most seasoned warriors, its commanders, its heroes, friends, family, mentors, vanished in a flash of light and fire. Many believed they perished in the destruction of Draenor. Others held on to the hope they had escaped. But as days turned to weeks, weeks to months, and months to years, their hope slowly faded. In time, the heroes of the Alliance expedition were honoured not just in memory, but in stone. Statues of the leaders were built in the Valley of Heroes in Stormwind City, immortalising the leaders who had crossed into the unknown and never returned. They stand as a solemn reminder, etched in the heart of the kingdom for every citizen to remember the sacrifice made to save their world. But what the people of Azeroth didn't yet fully realise was that Draenor had not been completely destroyed. Not entirely. The core of the world had survived. What remained was now known as the Outland, a shattered realm of floating land masses adrift near the twisting nether, and on those fractured remnants, the Sons of Lothar had survived. Against all odds, the Sons of Lothar somehow managed to regroup at their original stronghold, Hold, but the cost of this was steep. Turalyon and Alleria Windrunner were missing. Determined to find their comrades, the surviving Sons of Lothar launched search missions across Outland. Despite relentless effort, no trace of Turalyon or Alleria was ever found. With hope fading, Khadgar and Danath made the painful call to end the searches, assuming that they were gone. Danath took command of the Sons, vowing to carry on their mission in the shattered remains of Draenor. But the fragile calm after the destruction of the world would not last. The ever-watchful Burning Legion saw an opportunity in Outland's ruin. They sent the Pit Lord Magtheridon to seize control of the fractured remains. He enslaved the remaining orcs with demonic blood, corrupting them into the fell Horde, a new force for brutal conquest. Outnumbered and outmatched, Khadgar, Danath and Kurdran knew they couldn't win a full-scale war, but they could resist. They rallied the remaining forces of the Sons of Lothar and waged a quiet war against the Burning Legion from the shadows. A desperate struggle for survival fought in the twilight of a dying world. For 18 long years, the stranded heroes on Outland fought relentlessly to hold back the Burning Legion. Cut off from Azeroth, they battled in isolation, and they were unaware of the world-shaping events unfolding back home. The rise of the Lich King, the fall of Lordaeron, the devastation of the Third War, the assault on the Blackwing Lair, the Ahn'Qiraj War, and the assault on Naxxramas, all marked turning points in Azeroth's history. But for our story, the most important moment was yet to come. During the Third War, after betraying the Night Elves, the demon hunter Illidan Stormrage, spared by his brother Malfurion, fled from Azeroth. Kil'jaeden, seeing potential in Illidan, allowed him to claim Outland, so long as he destroyed the Lich King as payment. But after his defeat at the hands of Arthas, Illidan retreated back to Outland. There he declared himself Lord of Outland, rallying his most loyal followers. Knowing the Legion would seek revenge for his failure, he began preparing for war. His allies worked to seal the portals to Outland, buying him time to fortify his rule over the dead planet. But, as always, the Legion would eventually return. Lord Khazak, long thought defeated, discovered a powerful relic and used it to reopen the Dark Portal, tearing a new gateway between Outland and Azeroth, and the Burning Legion surged through. Azeroth, however, was ready. The initial invasion was repelled by the defenders of the Netherguard Keep, aided by the Argent Dawn and mercenaries from across the realms. Soon after, joint forces of the Alliance and the Horde arrived to reinforce the defence. Together, they held the line, and the Legion was driven back to Outland. History, as it so often does, begins to repeat itself here. Now, both the Alliance and now the Horde were faced with a familiar choice: wait and see what comes through next, or step through and strike back. This time the decision was more clear. To protect Azeroth, both factions set aside their rivalry and stormed through the Dark Portal, marching into the broken world of Outland. When they arrived, Horde and Alliance forces seized the Stair of Destiny and established a foothold on the Hellfire Peninsula, but their unity was short-lived. Soon after securing the gateway, the factions split. The Horde established Thrallmar to the north, a stronghold just outside the Hellfire Citadel, and the Alliance, on the other hand, made a discovery that would change everything. They discovered a fortress rising from the red dust, its design unmistakably familiar. What they found was not ruin, it was a bastion the Alliance had found on Hold, manned by Alliance heroes long thought dead. After stepping through the Dark Portal, the Alliance had found the long-lost Sons of Lothar. At the head of Hold and the Sons of Lothar stood Commander Danath Trollbane, believed to be dead but very much alive, now more aged and battle-worn from fighting the Burning Legion for 18 long years. But Trollbane wasn't the only member of the original leadership to greet the arriving Alliance forces. Kurdran Wildhammer led the defence from the skies at Wildhammer Stronghold in Shadowmoon Valley. From Shattrath City, Khadgar worked to unite the fractured realm. Using his magic, he reached into the Great Dark Beyond and made contact with the Naaru. With their help, the Archmage had stabilised the region and was organising coordinated defences against the Burning Legion. The reunion with these long-lost heroes stirred hope amongst the Alliance, but it also stirred sorrow. One question was spreading across the ranks of the soldiers. What had become of Turalyon and Alleria Windrunner? Over time, the Sons of Lothar rejoined the Alliance ranks, fighting through the invasion of Outland, the war against Illidan Stormrage, and the long bitter battles that followed. When the dusts finally settled, the legendary leaders each went their separate ways. Kurdran Wildhammer returned to Azeroth after the Cataclysm, taking command of Alliance forces in the Twilight Highlands and defending Khazmodan with the same unbreakable spirit he had shown on Outland. Khadgar also eventually returned back to Azeroth as well, resuming his war against the Burning Legion, a threat that refused to die. And then finally, Danath Trollbane remained behind, choosing to continue his watch over on Hold, the fortress he had helped build and defend through the endless trials. Though the name Sons of Lothar began to fade into memory, their legacy lived on. Quietly and far beyond Azeroth, their story continued, unseen, unknown, and far from over. In the 32nd year, the Burning Legion of course had returned, unleashing its most devastating invasion yet. As Azeroth stood on the brink of destruction, the forces of the Alliance, Horde, and others rallied for one final stand. Warned by Khadgar of the Legion's plans, the unified armies launched a desperate assault on the broken shore, seeking to close the portal at the Tomb of Sargeras. During the battle, Paladins of the Silver Hand witnessed a blinding light strike across the sky, a radiant object piercing the Fellstorm and crashing into the sea near Suramar. Khadgar sent champions to investigate, and in a submerged cave guarded by the sea giant Yorg Murkmouth, they recovered the mysterious artifact and returned it to Dalaran. This relic would awaken a story that we thought had ended.
Azeroth, I pray that this, the final plea of the Army of the Light, has reached you intact. The 1,000 Years' War has reached its peak, but the nightmare is far from over. This vessel represents our ultimate sacrifice. It must reach the Prophet. He is the key. Succeed, and the light may yet endure. Fail, and all worlds will burn. We will not fail. Turalyon.
Decades ago, when Draenor was torn apart by Ner'zhul, Turalyon and Alleria Windrunner were cast into the Twisting Nether, a place where reality was bleeding into chaos. There, they were found, but not by accident, by design. Lothraxion, once a dreadlord but now a champion of the Army of Light, came to them. He revealed that the couple had a greater destiny, to join the eternal war against the Legion. Soon after, the radiant Naru Xera appeared, and told Alleria of a dire prophecy. Though the Legion had failed before, the next assault on Azeroth would be their most dangerous and most successful. Faced with a choice between personal longing and cosmic duty, Turalyon and Alleria chose sacrifice. They stepped through the light's portal, vanishing into the stars, to join a war that spanned across the universe. But despite this cosmic war, the Legion always returned. Turalyon entrusted his final hope into the light's heart, Xera's sentient core. He encoded a message and cast it into the stars, praying it would reach Azeroth, and be found by someone he knew could help them. We won't dwell on the war on Argus, that's a story for another time, but what does matter is that the light's heart was found by the exact person Turalyon needed. Khadgar eventually reached them, bringing news from home. Danath Trollbane and Kurdran Wildhammer had also survived, and the Sons of Lothar lived on. After decades lost to time and war, they gathered once more, and it wasn't on a battlefield. It was a feast during the holiday season, a long overdue reunion of the legends of Azeroth.
I've been waiting a long time for this feast. This chance to join with my dearest friends in our secret place, beyond her reach. Pardon me, old-timers. I'm looking for the Sons of Lothar. It's good to see you. It is better to see you, Khadgar.
And so, the stories of the Sons of Lothar comes to an end. And it's not just a tale of war and glory, it's a story of sacrifice, of brotherhood, and of enduring hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. These weren't just warriors, they were leaders, icons, men and women who gave everything, not for fame, but for the world they loved. Some returned home, some never did. But all of them left a mark on Azeroth that time will never erase. As the world moves forward and new champions rise, may we never forget those who stood tall when all seemed lost. The ones who crossed a portal into the unknown and became immortal in the pages of history. They were the Sons of Lothar.